Good morning, happy Monday. You're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Dani Laurel.
And I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day, Monday. Remittances continue to grow according to fresh data from the Banco Central, but economists warn the momentum may be dampened by the Omicron-driven soar in COVID-19 cases around the world.
Active virus infections in the Philippines hit a record high for the fifth straight day, but despite the grim numbers, the health department says the latest wave has yet to peak.
Local stocks are expected to move sideways this week amid the ongoing COVID-19 surge overseas. Investors search for safe havens as Omicron takes hold in Asia.
And the no vaccination, no ride policy in public transportation takes effect in Metro Manila. That's today. We begin our broadcast with the continued growth of remittances.
Latest data from the Banco Central showed that money sent home by migrant Filipino workers rose for the 10th straight month in November last year. Cash remittances coursed through banks in November grew by 5% from a year earlier to $2.5 billion. Economists said remittances have continued to recover from their year-ago levels as more Filipinos got deployed overseas. That's on the back of easing restrictions. Remittances are then expected to post strong numbers for the last month of 2021. But BPI Chief Economist June Neri said remittances for January 2022 could be dampened by the Omicron-driven surge in COVID-19 cases worldwide. Meanwhile, gross borrowings by the national government reached 2.78 trillion pesos as of end November as it continued to source more funds for pandemic response programs. The January to November figure was nearly 9% lower from the 3.05 trillion pesos raised in the same period in 2020.
Now, the health department says the ongoing COVID-19 surge has yet to peak. On Sunday, the health department logged over 37,000 new COVID-19 infections. That's the third highest single day tally since the onset of the pandemic. The number of active cases hit a new record high for the fifth consecutive day at nearly 288,000. Despite this, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Verger says they are still not seeing the peak of cases just yet. Verger said they expect to peak or the peak to happen by the end of the month or the second week of February. Meanwhile, the Octa Research Group says yesterday's figures are lower than expected. On One News, Professor Guido David says this could mean some areas already seeing a downtrend in cases. But he also warns that it could also be an artificial decrease as cases may have the possibility to exceed the country's testing capacity. David still hopes that this is an indication that we are close to reaching the peak of the surge.
Nakikita po natin base sa mga projections po ng ating mga eksperto na patuloy pong tataas ang ating mga kaso. Nakikita po natin na maaari pang magdoble ang numero ng active cases natin compared to today by that time of February 15 po.
We're hoping that it is an indication, but we'll have to wait and see over the next few days. In the NCR, I think we could expect fewer cases. Again, it's not guaranteed. It may be around the same level, but I think today there's a good chance that we could be seeing just 60,000 cases.
All right, then happy Monday, another week. And if we are to believe what we just heard, then we might see another week of record number of Omicron cases, and it's making investors search for safe havens. What's the sentiment?
Like you said, I mean, take a look at the open here. Very wobbly. We actually started in the red this morning. That drop right here you can see, but now recovering pretty quickly. So it's really sideways, as you already mentioned, and that's really because investors are on edge. So the sentiment is it's tough, but slightly better. We've relaxed those travel bans. Fully vaccinated travelers, for instance, from low risk areas, you got China, Hong Kong, Japan, no longer need to quarantine, and those stranded in those high risk areas can now come in subject to quarantine. So a little bit better. You even saw net foreign buying last week. We were at 60 million pesos from the foreigners, and we did close in the green week on week. Now, as you mentioned, Tina Ulang of First Metro Investment says shares are going to be moving sideways this week. Seems to be that prediction is literally coming true. She says any signs of peaking will push the market higher. She means peaking in terms of the COVID-19 cases. So once that happens, we might actually see the market moving higher as we approach Chinese New Year. She says the Chinese New Year is a seasonally strong period for share prices. Now let's take a look at Asia here, which is very, very interesting to watch. Again, it's really a mixed picture. You've got Japan in the green, the Nikkei 225 up by close to 1%, but then other markets, firmly in the red here. This is a cautious open, seeing that there's going to be economic data coming in from China, and that is seen to underline an economic slowdown. There will be a real estate downturn that is happening, and power shortage that might have contributed to the weakest Chinese expansion in more than 1 year last quarter. And like you mentioned, investors are searching for safe havens, but yet many are remaining positive about whether Asia can actually weather this Omicron storm. What's very interesting is that Asian stocks have done better than European and US counterparts so far this year. This compared to 2021, where we were underperforming then. And the strategist at Modular Asset Management, Wai Ho Leong, said Asia will be better braced to cope with Omicron waves, which might prove to be more short lived. He said that if you have markets that are better vaccinated with timely social distancing curbs, we might recover faster from this wave. And which ones to recover? He says Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, China, and Malaysia as potential winners, and still looking at whether the Philippines, together with Thailand and India, which are still starting to see surges, will follow suit. Now, another thing that I wanted to highlight, Jess, is the listing today of house stock. Let's take a look at that. I was actually looking at that at the open, and it does seem to be jumping from its IPO price of 1 peso and 50 centavos. Recall they're trying to raise 750 of they're already raised 750 million pesos. That's already up by a hefty 9% at the open. Very interesting movements here. And of course, here to talk about that specific listing and more on the table, we have with us the president of BDO Capital, Ed Francisco. Hi, Ed. Welcome back.
Hi, good morning, Danny.
Okay, Ed, what's going on here? I mean, this is a relatively small listing, but quite some excitement. What does it say about the sector in general, or just capital raising happening during a time of Omicron?
Yeah. No, first of all, it shows you that the capital markets are alive, right? As you mentioned, there's foreign buying already. And then, although, yeah, this is a relatively smaller issue, the fact that it's oversubscribed, as announced by the underwriters, and that the price today is above the IPO price is a good sign. I think it was some analysts commented it was a little expensive, but the fact that it's
Mm.
going up is great. And as long as the price is supported, then I'm congratulations to the issuer. And then we will see more activity because this is also a good sign because even Solar Philippines, right? It's when its price went up. So at least recent IPOs have continued to do well, and we continue to see that at least in the next few months.
And when you compare this to, like you mentioned, Solar Philippines or Medilines, what's going on in the minds of investors here? Are they favoring, specific sectors? Is there a general sentiment towards what makes us an IPO successful? Because the Medilines one, was a bit surprising to some.
Yeah. No, I think Medilines was an outlier. At the end of the day, the company is still a good story, but there might have been just some, I guess, inadvertent mistakes done. But
Mm.
I think that will eventually recover. But if you notice, what are the companies that are doing well? I guess healthcare related, Mediline, of course, property, consumer. Those are still the place. Utilities will also do well. So most of the IPOs we're doing are in those themes anyway, because those are the resilient industries.
Okay, you mentioned properties, and we also had MREIT jumping quite heftily in Friday's trade. What's going on there? What's the sentiment with REITs? Is that still an interesting play in the markets today, where you're seeing things hopefully reopen? We're in a surge right now, but there was already some sentiment that there would be reopening. We might be moving into the property stocks themselves rather than REITs. Why the sudden jump?
Right. No, no. For these REITs that are doing well anyway, the fact that they are REITs and then they're office spaces, right? They're very good
Mm.
tenancies. They've shown how resilient they are. And then I guess in the case, let's say, of the Mega World Group, I was just talking to Kevin Tan the other day. The fact that he has so many more properties that he wants to inject, good earning properties. So there's a lot of growth, a lot of upside. That's why I guess the prices have also been going up, because there will be potential capital raising, and I think investors are looking forward to that. Same also with Ayala anyway, they have more assets they want to inject. So I guess the quality of the sponsors is very good, and the other assets they have, so that will continue to be a growth story. So that's it's good for us, so they'll have more assets to invest in. Then
What indicators are you looking at, Ed, to say that the property sector is rebounding?
well, for first of all, right, last year the reason naman some of the property, I guess, stocks didn't do so well was they had a combination of malls in them, right? And then of course the malls were, in the past, the malls were the ones with very strong recurring growth, but in this case, they are the ones that were subsidized by the other business segments. So if that normalizes and as malls operate and consumer and mobility is not curtailed, right? So people shop, that should improve. And then also, of course, some of the high-rise condo developers, you've seen a slowdown there because people were afraid because of COVID. But I guess now that it's, hopefully we're peaking already, as you earlier mentioned, people are going back and they want to be living near their offices. So sales will continue to pick up again, and there will be continued, I guess, growth in that sector. So at least even the residential should do well because commercial has done well, but again, even as BPO continues to grow, and it's still a question mark on Pogo, but the commercial is strong. So as that continues to grow, and then the consumer side, the mall traffic picks up, then it'll be good for the Robinsons, the SMs, the Ayalas, everyone with the mix, with the diversified play.
You're leading the Citicorp REIT IPO, but there's also the SM Prime that hasn't happened yet. We were all anticipating that as well. How much more liquidity or appetite is there for additional REITs, given that we've raised quite a lot of money already on these REITs? And like you mentioned, there might be a rebound in the property space in general. Won't they prefer to put their money in the actual stocks?
Okay, good point. Someone might want to put their money in the actual stocks, but what we've discovered, Danny, is that the investors like the REITs because it's almost like a quasi debt instrument, right? They're investing for the yield, the expected yield, right? Because of the required 90% dividend requirement to be continued as a REIT. So they look at it as it's a combination of buying a debt instrument with hopefully getting between 5.5% to 6% effective yield, and then there's upside pa because if there's property there and it goes up, there's appreciation. You share in that, and
Mhm.
maybe that's why we see REITs as continuing. It will be a new asset play, and in fact, we're talking to some developers to create a REIT index. We want to see SM listed also because that's the last big one. When And then as you know, I'm doing City Core REIT, which is also
Mm-mm.
very strong, and it's the first non-real estate REIT. So as we add more assets in there, hopefully you'll put in a tollway. Hopefully you can even put some other utilities, even water, even other stuff there. Then the REIT play in the Philippines will be more developed. In Japan anyway, in Singapore, it's very well developed. So humahabol lang tayo. So there's still a long way to go.
How should we be treating Citicorp? Should we be comparing it to other REIT players, or should we be comparing it to the likes of, I don't know, Solar Philippines or other renewable energy?
Good question. No, yeah. At the end of the day, it still is a renewable energy company, right? But what we've done is we really fashion the cash flow so that at least the investors in Citicorp will get a good yield of hopefully between higher fives to 6% effective yield. At the same time, if they like green because this is all renewable, so they're helping the planet and they're having a good return. So it's also a quasi fixed income, and then there'll be upside because as they develop more, even Citicorp has some joint ventures, I think, with Ayala, with ASEN. So continue to see that stock continue to grow, and then they'll become a major player in the space.
Ed, let's talk about the Figaro IPO possibly happening on the 24th. They are still banking on dine-in to resume, and they have mentioned, and some analysts have mentioned that for whatever reason, they're compared to pizza, for example, their sales and revenues have jumped dramatically during pandemic. What are they doing differently here, and how can they, defend this position given the lockdowns and of course the closures in the restaurant industry?
Right. No, I think it was very prudent of the, the sponsors, I guess, to reduce the price, right? Because
Mhm.
I guess malas rin because they were after medics, right? So they had to distance themselves. So that was a good strategy. And then they also reduced the price. Of course, they've had to adjust their capex requirements. But you're right. When you're investing in Figaro, you're not really investing just in a coffee chain. You're investing in pizza, right? Angel.
Mm.
So I think there's good potential there. There are other brands also. There's an unlisted brand that's doing extremely well. I even heard it from my daughter who described it to me. I never knew who that was, but there are these opportunities. So
Okay.
even for dine-in, people are buying that, and as they reopen, I think that will do well. So as long as it's priced already reasonably, then there'll be a good future growth there because even Shakey's, they use the Shakey's platform to buy potato corn, and we help the Crispo family with that also. So food,
Okay.
the consumer will come back, and it will be a springboard towards acquiring other brands.
Okay. Last question on Figaro. Is that cheap for you now?
It's ano na because of they price it at the lower end, no. So it's already reasonable. So as long as you like pizza, and I think there are pizza lovers here, and of course coffee. We love coffee. Also, Figaro's also have great coffee, and then as they I guess reopen their stores again, then that should be a good stock also because it's a consumer play.
Okay, very exciting times there. Thank you so much for the update on the capital raising, Ed Francisco, BDO Capital.
Thank you, Danny.
Here are the other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Trade Department and PhilDev Foundation recently launched two programs that seek to support startup growth in the country. These are the Incubation, Development, and Entrepreneurial Assistance Program, or IDEA, and the Accelerating Development, Valuation, and Corporate Entrepreneurship, or the ADVANCE Program. The DTI says both programs will provide customized support such as coaching, mentoring, training, and workshops to address issues faced by local startups. For starters, the IDEA program is for early stage tech startups. It is expected to encourage collaboration among startups, mentors, investors, and the government to produce market ready products. Meanwhile, the advanced program seeks to help the expansion of tech startups that are already in the growth stage.
Now, this from the Philippines star, the Bangko Sentral is launching a new index to help gauge the sentiment of consumers and businesses based on prevailing economic conditions. BSP Governor Ben Diokno said the central bank is developing a new sentiment index that will be based on online economic and financial news. But for now, Diokno says the models are still in the early stages of development and have to go through more testing and enhancements. As part of its big data roadmap, the central bank says it is modernizing its IT infrastructure and enhancing the skills of its human resources to support the use of big data in its operations. Diokno expects big data technology to further enhance the BSP's capacity for economic assessment and policy formulation.
Another one from the Philippine Star, the international arm of PLDT has entered into a partnership with fintech firm Beam and Go. Under the partnership, OFWs can access Beam and Go supermarket electronic gift certificates by using PLDT Global's digital distribution platform called Vortex. Beam and Go Marketplace is an alternative to remittance where OFWs can purchase basic needs such as groceries, medicines, and food for their families back in the Philippines.
The International Labor Organization says about 2.2 million workers were directly affected by Typhoon Odette. Regions with the most number of workers affected include Western Visayas with over 670,000 and Central Visayas with over 640,000. The DA meanwhile reported that the total damage caused by Odette to agriculture has reached 13.4 billion pesos as of Friday. The typhoon affected almost 450,000 farmers and fishers. Volume of production loss stands at 267,000 metric tons, recorded across 449,000 hectares of agricultural areas. The Agriculture Department says it has provided at least 2.9 billion pesos to assist farmers, fishers, and other rural folk affected by Typhoon Odette.
Coming right up, drivers and even traffic enforcers admit the no vaccine, no ride policy in public transportation will be difficult to enforce.
More of that and other stories when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
morning. You're still watching Business World Live. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. The Transportation Department kicks off the implementation of the no vaccine, no ride policy that's in Metro Manila today.
But some drivers and even traffic authorities themselves admit that this policy will be difficult to enforce. Camille Samonte with a story.
Transpo in Metro Manila. Some PUV drivers have expressed concern amid the proliferation of fake vaccination cards. Bus driver Joselito Guanzon said his passengers will have to present their IDs to verify the legitimacy of their cards.
May hinihingi po kami ma'am, ID. ID nila, bukod doon sa vaccination card, magkaparehas. Kapag hindi po, hindi po pwedeng makasakay.
Other drivers meanwhile said they will only accept vaccination cards with QR codes.
Titingnan mo yung mga, yan ang sa Cavite, hindi mo talaga madadaya dahil, ayan may QR code yan. Karamihan dito, mayroon mga dito na walang QR code. Sabi ko, piki yan, kitong original, may QR code. Dapat ganon.
But for jeepney driver William Celosha, doing a thorough check during their trip would be a big hassle on their part.
Yun nga ma'am, kasi may mga piki. May mga piki, alam ko may mga piki. Yun lang mahirap Basta ano lang namin gagawin, susubukan namin.
Some commuters also believe that this would only cause inconvenience.
Hindi naman natutupad nakakapasok kami without showing the vaccination card to the outlet, to the mall, even in the transportation.
Kung bigandaanan ng sakyan, katulad niya may mga overpass, stoplight, mapakita mo pa ba agad-agad yun?
The Transportation Department, traffic enforcers, and LGUs in Metro Manila for their part vow to assist PUV drivers. But they also admit that the no vax, no ride policy will be difficult to implement.
Siguro paalala rin po tayo sa lahat ng natin before yung driver po natin, mapagsabihan na rin po na before isuot na rin po yung vaccination.
The DOTR will also deploy mystery passengers to ensure the compliance of PUV drivers.
Upang masigurado ho natin na kahit wala hong naka-uniforme na enforcer ay sumusunod po ang ating mga drivers dito sa ating polisiya at dito ho natin makikita kung paano po ma-implement itong ating programa.
Rail operators and airlines have expressed support for the directive. For News 5, Camille Samonte, we are One News.
And that's a first look into the business day this Monday, January 17, 2022. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.